If you're an adult in America, do you have the right to own a gun? 35 years ago, Washington, D.C. said no. They passed a law that banned handguns. That law was challenged in court, and 2 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled the ban was unconstitutional. The mayor was upset.
More handguns in the District of Columbia will only lead to more handgun violence.
But that didn't happen. In fact, murder and other gun violence have dropped in D.C. since the Supreme Court overturned the handgun ban. And let's now go back 35 years to when Washington passed its gun ban. In the years that followed, crime went up compared to other big cities and compared to the rest of America. Fewer guns, more crime. It's counterintuitive, but it does seem to be true. Gun rights supporters were excited when the Supreme Court overturned the Washington law, but that case was not the big one because it just applies to D.C., to federal property. The big case is being debated now by the Supreme Court, and next week, or maybe even tomorrow, the court is expected to announce its decision. The case is called McDonald versus Chicago. If the court sides with McDonald, it would apply the right to bear arms to people in all cities. The lead plaintiff in that lawsuit is Otis McDonald. Here's an interview done with him by Fox's Chicago affiliate.
In the 38 years that you've lived here, how many times have you been burglarized?
The house 3 times, the garage twice.
McDonald lives in a Chicago neighborhood that he says has been taken over by gangs and drug dealers.
He says he'd feel safer if he had a handgun by his bed. But then he'd be breaking Chicago's 28-year-old handgun ban.
Why is owning a gun important to you?
When my life is threatened, I like to be able to at least feel that I can protect myself.
Chicago's lawyer, who opposes giving McDonald a gun, wouldn't come on to defend the ban, so Dennis Hennigan from the Brady campaign is back to give Chicago's side. Also with us is Alan Gura, the lawyer who argued McDonald's case before the Supreme Court. But before we go to the lawyers, let's go to the plaintiff, 76-year-old Otis McDonald. So, Mr. McDonald, you own a shotgun. Isn't that enough? You want a handgun, too?
Yes. I own a shotgun for hunting game.
Isn't that enough?
No.
Why?
I don't think it would be efficient enough for me to handle in close quarters with a would-be killer or something like that.
And your house has been broken into several times?
Yes, it has been.
Last time when the police got there, the bad guy was in the garage under your wife's car?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And a handgun, even if you didn't use it, would make you feel safer?
Yes, it would. Yes.
What's your answer to that?
Well, John, our organization actually does not promote handgun bans as a policy matter. We don't think it should be a constitutional issue. We think communities should be able to decide on the gun laws they think are most appropriate for their community.
Would you be perfectly happy if Chicago says no to him?
Well, we just don't think it should be a constitutional matter. The community should decide those issues. We don't think that it is necessary to go so far as to ban handguns in order to bring this problem under control. We think that you could enact the kind of restrictions, actually, that the District of Columbia has enacted following the striking down of their handgun ban. And those restrictions, which include, licensing, registration, consumer safety standards for guns, training requirements for guns, those requirements were actually upheld by a court that held they're not at all inconsistent with what the Supreme Court decided.
Alan Gura, what do you say to that?
The community in our country does not tell us what books to read, it does not tell us what religion to worship, and it does not tell us what guns we're allowed to use, what arms we're allowed to use to defend ourselves and our families and our own homes. The fact is that the overwhelming majority of Americans prefer handguns as a means of self-defense, and our Constitution guarantees them the right to use handguns for that purpose.
But our audience agrees. To defend Chicago, can't one city say we're going to have an experiment here? See what happens.
We don't get to experiment with people's basic constitutional rights, but as a matter of fact, we've had some experiments. We've had the disastrous experiment in Washington, D.C., and we've had, of course, the experiment which is still going on in Chicago. Last weekend,
let me ask you about it. He calls it a disastrous experiment, Washington, and I can see the point because crime went up.
Well, actually, the disastrous experiment is the one we talked about in the last segment with concealed weapons. You know what the murder capital of the country is? It's New Orleans. in the state of Louisiana that actually legalized carrying concealed weapons. So again, that experiment is a disaster.
For years.
And the fact is, with Washington, D.C., 90% of the guns that are used in crime in Washington, D.C. come from other states with weak gun laws. It is very difficult for a community to defend itself against them.
People who go out and go to the police station and sign up and do the background checks and get the permits do not commit the crime. The crime rate among licensed permit holders is virtually non-existent in this country. However, the fact of the matter is that no criminal is going to say, you know, I was going to rob that liquor store, I was going to hold up that couple in the park, but I couldn't get a permit to get the gun, so maybe I'll give up on that theory. That simply does not happen. We don't see committed criminals giving up on gang banging and all the other things that they do because they can't pass a background check or obtain a piece of paper from the government. That's ridiculous.
Have you thought about getting an illegal gun?
I've thought about it, yes, but I wouldn't do it.
I thank you all for joining us